pulled you into making this film. Can you talk more about what has driven you and your team for the last year and more in taking on such a difficult endeavor?
Yeah, thank you all for coming. I think for us, it's the more you the more you bear witness and understand what's at stake and how, as many of the characters you met today said, like every minute that passes, Ukrainian lives are at risk and the escalation continues, and the more you realize that the general apathy and can kind of and support can fade, the more you realize you have to keep going and you have to preserve this. And I think we've all seen in our different work of capturing political stuff between all of us. We've tried to cover political stories and realize that even if you cover them, people forget. Collective memory gets erased. So I think that's been pushing us to keep going.
Mike, this is a story that is ongoing, and even within the last couple of weeks, there are people in this film who have changed jobs. And can you talk about how you as a team thought about constructing this film and where to stop filming?
Well, one of the characters you mentioned, Rustem Umerov, is now the Defense Secretary of Ukraine, so that's a Minister of Defense. Well, that's how you call it in this country, anyway. Sorry. I mean, we didn't really think too much about it. What we had was an amazing opportunity and the trust of these people to document the work they were doing. And we just followed that story. And indeed, obviously we weren't going to follow the war to its conclusion. And I think the Minister Kaleva's UN speech in January was a nice sort of reason to end the film when we did, because you do have to stop filming at some stage, and that gave us our ending. But it wasn't something we really planned or thought about too much. We just were lucky enough to have this incredible access and this amazing material and witnessing history. And we did our best to make it a sort of cogent journey for everybody.
Augusta, can you share what your experiences have been in the country filming this project?
Well, first, I'd love to just also give a big thanks to the rest of our team that are here tonight. We have a lot of our team that's here. We worked very hard for Jake Stalko, our VP, Liam. Gosh, I can't see all of you, but we had so many people on this team, Ukrainians. Edit team, of course, I mean, so many. But I actually just came back from Ukraine 2 weeks ago. As you mentioned, the film was finished 3 days ago. But, and I also want to say that while we were in this movie theater from start to finish, there was an air raid going on in Kiev, because at the time, while we were watching the film, there were missiles being sent to Kiev. And I just know that because I still have my air raid app on my phone. And I think for me it really changed my life, because I got to know all these incredible people and understand what it is to believe in something very strong to the point where you fight for it without end in sight. And I'm very, very, very grateful for this experience and all the people that we got to know.
Alexei, welcome. You just arrived from Kyiv today. What do you hope that an international audience will take away from this film?
Probably two things. First of all, I want to thank you, people of Canada and US and the EU, for interest and support, because without this support, unlikely any success would be possible in Ukraine. And secondly, that all characters we see in the film, including now 2 ministers of defense, they are people who didn't think that they would deal with weapons, fighting, military. So all of them were like peaceful people. I studied at the same institute with the Kuleba, foreign relations. But now all of us are dealing with this war. And we know that it is possible. It is possible to win. We understand that it's a long run, but we're prepared for it. So just please keep supporting us, and we definitely will win in this. Thank you.
Let me take some questions from the audience. If you raise your hand, I'll call on you. Is that a hand up there in the blue?
Yeah, in the entire movie, everybody calls Putin President Putin, even the grainy. During filming, has anybody called him asshole Putin or something derogatory?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, there's not a huge amount of respect for him as a political figure, obviously, in general.
Right. Yes, whoever's it over right here.
So, of course, at the beginning of the film, we talked about the technology. They turned to Elon Musk and Starlink, and of course, we now are hearing this week about Musk's interference. And so, I'm wondering about the dependence on private technology, though good and bad. I'm just wondering what effect all of that is having in Ukraine. And then there was the interview with Google and the idea of misinformation.
If anyone in the back didn't hear, it was a question about technology and Elon Musk and the good side and bad side to reliance on technology. If you can reflect on any of that.
Yeah, well, I think in the we sought out to bring a few different front lines to life in this film, right? Traditionally, when you look at a war movie, the front line is the battlefield and it's the engagement of soldiers and artillery. We thought that there was a diplomatic front line and a technological one as well, where misinformation was a key kind of place of action. And I think that in this new world that we live in, as important as Ukraine's diplomatic efforts are with governments, especially in the West, we live in a world where a handful of technology companies are more powerful than most governments in the world, right? The state of Facebook is the largest nation in the world, some would argue, right? More users than anywhere else. So, with that in mind, I think it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you can have someone like Elon Musk press a button, and all of a sudden people can have Starlink. And on the other hand, that's a massive dependency. But I think that's a larger issue of our over-dependency to the tech overlords. And we made a film called The Great Hacker. We'll talk about that as well. But yes, that's it's obviously a challenge, and I think we hope that the technology companies can do the right thing and can realize that their companies wouldn't exist without the open society that was born from the ashes of two great wars. And they have a responsibility to protect freedom around the world and to not use their technology to further polarize us and to decide when they want some people to win or not.
Hand right up there in the blue.
Cool. So again and again, you mentioned this is downward trend of this risk of it fading away. You guys are doing an incredible job of stopping that. How can average people? What do you think the world can do to stop it fading away? Or how can we help? Yeah.
Well, obviously that was our intention of making the film, and it is very hard, and there are so many terrible things happening around the world that take people's attention. I don't think there's a simple answer how you keep it going, other than people understanding that this is the most important crisis the world has faced and is facing. And until Russia is defeated, the world doesn't have a future. So it is about getting people to identify it's not Ukraine's struggle, it's our struggle. And we're not defending Ukraine, we're defending ourselves. This is an act of self-defense. And how do you get people to understand that enough? I don't know.
Well, just going back to the Starlink thing for a second, I spent a lot of time on the front lines, and I will say, if Elon Musk turned off that Starlink, Russia would win the war in probably 4 days. That's how much power Starlink has right now on the war in Ukraine. They have no other way to communicate targets from, they receive target information and they send it to their drone unit who then hits a target. Without Starlink, the war's over. Same with other things like Google Meets, Signal, just a few very basic technologies that are used to continue the war. And what to do is talk about it, don't let people forget.
And, continuing on technology dependence, it's also called as a first world war of drones. So the role of drones is very, very, very important, because a drone which costs $500 can destroy a tank which costs like 5 million. Now much of these drones are produced in China, for example, so it also have its influence. Though in Ukraine the production of different type of drones is rapidly developing now. One of our characters, Michael Fedorov, he launched as Vice Prime Minister such, how to say, overarching campaign of foresting drone production. Yes, so technology plays a huge role, and of course smartphones. So now it's a war which is the most documented war probably ever.
Yeah, speaking of drones, actually the most used drone on the battlefront is the Mavic 3, which is a Chinese-made drone that was made to film weddings. They just rigged it to hold a little bomb, and they use it to drop in Russian positions.
Question right here.
Wondering if in your filming, at any time, you find any support for the Russian propaganda idea that they were essentially defending themselves by attacking Ukraine, the idea that NATO was surrounding Russia. Did that have any kind of truth to it? I mean, was support
Mike, can you summarize the question?
Yeah, in our time in Ukraine, did we find anybody that took the rather ludicrous and shameful lie that Russia was defending itself by destroying children? So no is the answer. I mean, there's absolutely not. And again, the point of making this film was that to destroy. I mean, there's not two sides to this war. There are two. There's no right. There's no two sides to murder. There's no argument for murder. It's just wrong. And but what is disturbing is how many nice, ordinary, liberal, well-informed people think that there are perhaps two sides, and perhaps that somehow Russia's got a claim to Crimea, that somehow the war was provoked by Ukrainian Nazis. All these things. I mean, it's incredible how strong that propaganda is and those lies are. And I think our number one motivation for making this film was to destroy those lies if we can, because it's destroying the world.
One thing I want to say about that, because that question comes from a range of questions that you get about this idea of, like I live between the United States and Egypt, and in a country like Egypt, most people believe a lot of the Russian propaganda, and that's not because they're ignorant. It's because the cost of the West's failure to uphold to its own values in the last 20 years, particularly with the war on terror and the devastation of the Middle East and many parts of the world, has made Western credibility decrease overall. The cost of the industrial war machine has hurt us all. Now, the thing is, that's not Ukraine's fault. Like, Ukraine shouldn't suffer because of American expansionism. Ukraine shouldn't suffer because of Western hypocrisy. Right? So those are two different things. And yes, we will address these other issues, and we have to correct what has happened. However, right now, what's at stake at Ukraine is the entire idea of the free world collapsing. Right? The entire framework that was born from genocidal Holocaust and world wars and all, and it's an imperfect framework. No one's saying it's perfect. The UN's flawed. World Bank, all these things are flawed, but it's better to have these international institutions than to just say, forget it all, and it's all the shit, and that's it. So it's just something.
I'll add to that about the propaganda and how far it reaches, though, is I've heard stories, definitely not any of the government people that believe the Russian propaganda, but they would tell me stories about when they were evacuating people in the east, and literally from like bombed houses where the wife is dead on the floor, and they're like, no, don't take me, the Russians are here to save me. And they were just like, almost makes me want to just leave them there. But no, it's very strong, and if you want to believe it, you do.
Just wanted to add that idea of Russian propaganda is not always to achieve that they're correct, but to achieve that everybody is wrong. So achieving the idea that the West is always wrong, that there is no good things in democracy, in free market, I don't know, whatever. And when they're achieving this, that everything doesn't matter, everything is wrong, there are no true correct things, then they can do whatever they want, then only a strong man matters.
Karim, as I wrap this up, we said 10 years ago you were here with the film The Square, and that film had this incredible life that went around the world, including to Ukraine and moved people. This is the first audience that's seen Defiant. What are your hopes for this film to go from here?
Well, the Square was, at that time, the events of Tahrir it was the biggest news story from the previous 5 years before, and it was one of the most recorded moments in modern history. Everyone had a smartphone that was recording it, and while I'm proud of the film and everything, in Egypt today, people don't know the story of the Square. It's been erased from the collective memory. It's buried, it's quieted, right? And so that shows the power of cognitive dissonance and how people's memory can be erased. And I just really hope that the war in Ukraine doesn't fade, right? That we don't consider Ukraine to be an over there place, a place that doesn't affect us. Because I think this war is here to remind us that fascism anywhere is fascism everywhere. And you either want to live in an interdependent world, where just like people who, the environmental movement has achieved, people understand now, if Brazil burns the Amazon, it affects us all. I pray we can get to a place where human life is valued in that same way, right? That we actually believe that blood spilled anywhere affects us no matter where. There is no safe place. So I hope that the film can be used as a political tool. This is a political tool. This is not just filmmaking for fun. This is a political tool because the stakes of the free world are I can't say right now that my kids are going to inherit a better world than I grew up in, and that makes me very sad. So that's why we have to make these films and get them out there and create homes for political films at this time. That's why what TIFF's doing by giving a home to political films is important, and that's why we hope that the streamers and everybody realize that the annuity of independence for independent filmmaking needs to have good homes beyond just this film, for all political films. And if you don't want to do that, it's on us, right? So we have to use these tech platforms to actually make a difference and stand for something, or don't complain when the world that you love burns down.
You're the first audience to see Defiant. Please carry the message outside the theater however you can. Hope you get some more films this week. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks especially to the team of Defiant.